Welcome to Outside the Music Box. I'm Chloe Prendergast.
And I'm Emma Williams. We're so glad you joined us today.
We're both violinists based in the Netherlands and have created this podcast in our search to find fun new ways to share and talk about music we love. Each episode we explore a different piece of music through the eyes of a guest musician.
Today's guest is Mezzo-soprano Lotte Betts-Dean, who I've known since I was 11. We grew up singing together in Gondwana Voices, Australia's national children's choir, and apart from being great gal pals, we also love working together whenever we get the chance. Today, she's brought in a few different pieces that have been important to her life as a musician.
We do our best to define the relevant music-y terms throughout the chat, but because this is our world and we're human, there might be things that we miss. So please let us know what these are, and we will be sure to clarify them in future episodes.
And don't worry about trying to remember the pieces and recordings we talk about. They are in the show notes, along with a link to a Spotify playlist, so you can go back and listen to all the pieces from this podcast yourself. Thanks for joining us, and enjoy our chat with Lotte.
Black, black, black is the color of my true love's hair. His lips are something rosy fair, her sweetest smile, and the kindest hair.
Hello.
Hello. Hi. Is this working?
I think so.
It's so working. Such a pleasure to have you. Thanks for having me. Now, on this podcast, we actually get our guests to introduce themselves. So do you mind introducing yourself for everyone?
Of course. I'm Lotte BettsDean. I'm an Australian mezzo-soprano. I'm based in London. I've been here for about 6 years. And I sing all sorts of different kinds of music. I love singing contemporary music, early music, chamber music, non-classical stuff, a bit of opera, lots of art song recital. I like to keep it really varied and enjoy all different kinds of music. So yeah, that's what I do, and I'm very, very lucky to be able to do lots of different things all the time.
Yeah. And why did you originally move to London? How'd that happen?
I came here to complete a master's at the Royal Academy of Music. So yeah, I moved over in 2014. I'd been freelancing for a couple of years already after graduating from the Melbourne Conservatorium, where I did my undergraduate degree, and realised I wanted to get out of Australia, kind of, and also keep learning. As amazing as Australia is, and don't get me wrong, there's a wonderful music scene there, and I go back at least once a year for various projects. But I did feel a pull to Europe. I also considered the States to study, but yeah, luckily got a scholarship at the Royal Academy and decided to move to London. Also, partly that decision was made by the fact that I have a very beloved little sister who lives in the UK, and she was living in Cambridge at the time. So I wanted to be closer to her because we had lived on other sides of the world for a few years. So I missed her a lot. Emma is very good friends with her as well, and so you understand that.
I really understand.
And you've brought a few pieces today to talk about. Do you know which one you want to start with?
Wow. Why don't we start with the Berio folk songs?
Great.
It's the most substantial of the songs that I've chosen. And yeah, it's one of my favorite pieces to perform.
So when did you first hear them or sing them, or where did that start for you, your journey with Berio?
Well, I'd heard them. I remember hearing them during my undergraduate degree and just falling in love with them. I think it must have been 2010, I think even my first year of undergrad, and I found them on a CD and just absolutely loved them. But they are scored for, quite a few musicians. It's sort of an ensemble of musicians, so not the kind of piece that you can just pull together as an undergrad student with your friends, sort of thing. Yeah. So it was sort of one of those, like, I immediately put it in my sort of bucket list of music. Do you have that? Do you have that as well? Those like pieces where
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
For sure.
Yeah, where you're like, oh, one day, you know.
Yeah.
So it just shot to the top of that list, and then luckily an opportunity did arise. I think it was in 2013 to perform the full set of songs with an ensemble made up of staff members at ANAM, the Australian National Academy of Music. And the ensemble also included my uncle playing the clarinet, Paul. He's a clarinetist. And so that was a really special memory, and I finally got to sing them for the first time. And since that first performance, I've revisited them a couple of times in London, and then and most recently in Brisbane with my uncle again. His new ensemble. He has a new ensemble based in Brisbane called Ensemble Q, and we recorded that performance. That was last May, and it's actually going to be coming out on a CD as well. So it's been a really interesting. It's been one of those pieces that sort of has like accompanied me on my career thus far, from the beginning to now. So yeah, it's a wonderful piece.
You'll hear more about this later, but for some background, Luciano Berio was an Italian 20th century composer who wrote this set of 11 songs for voice and small ensemble in 1964 called folk songs. Berio used folk or folk-like songs from all over the world in different languages, though 2 of them were actually composed by him. He wrote this collection of pieces for his wife at the time, Cathy Berberian, who premiered many of his works.
And do you remember what stuck out to you when you first heard it? Like, why did it shoot to the top of that bucket list?
Well, I mean, the opening is incredibly enigmatic and beautiful, and I just couldn't get that opening of the piece out of my mind. It starts with this really beautiful viola solo, and Berio instructed the viola player to sort of play it like a wistful country fiddler, and it really has that kind of, it takes you somewhere else immediately. And then the voice comes in at the bottom of the range, so really singing very low for the mezzo voice, and it's an American song, an American, not actually a folk song. The first 2 songs are actually not folk songs. They were compositions by this composer called John Jacob Niles that then Berio arranged, and it's a beautiful song called "Black is the Color of My True Love's Hair," and it just starts with viola and voice. And the viola is a special instrument anyway. It means a lot to me. My father is a viola player, and I grew up with the sound of the viola all the time. So I think that the opening of that piece in itself just is, very emotional for me. It sort of elicits that sort of emotional, personal connection and reaction. And then the words of the song are just so moving as well. So I think that it really is. It's the beginning of the piece that first got me. But then, in getting to know it and performing it, it's such a varied piece. It's a collection of arrangements of folk music from all around the world, and it goes to all different interesting places and plays with different languages and textures, colors within the ensemble, how they communicate with the voice. It's a really varied and fascinating work. I think that's what sort of grabbed me about it, was that variety that's already inherent within the piece, because Berio collected these songs from all around the world, from different times, and then put his own spin on it. And it's incredibly accessible as well. All of the tunes are, you can sing along, it's this, maybe when you think Berio, you associate that with Berio being this Italian composer, Luciano Berio, who was composing in the first half of the 20th century. And he wrote a lot of quite challenging music, quite unusual, very modernistic and avant-garde kind of music. one of his most famous pieces was the set of sequenzas, these pieces that he wrote for solo instruments. And there's one for voice as well, and it is absolutely mad. I mean, it is just like an array of crazy vocal sounds. And so he's kind of, to some extent, associated with that very modern way of composing in the 20th century. And yet this piece, which was, I think, written in 1964, and it was just actually totally not that at all. Like it was very simple comparatively. It was going back to folk music and just a collection of lovely tunes, you know.
Yeah.
There's also a lot of sense of humor in them too, which is really attractive. And like one of them is called Balor, which actually he wrote. That is one of the exceptions. That's not a folk song. He did write that song, and it sort of the voice has to sort of speak very, very quickly this word Balor over and over, sort of bala 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 bala, and that in itself is sort of like a fun challenge, you know.
Yeah, you must do like tongue warm-ups or something before you sing, right? Or something.
Yeah. I mean, actually, I think in the score it's actually not Balor, even though the song is called Balor. It's called the way that you sing it is la 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 la, like just LA repeated. But that is really hard. Like not everyone can actually do that. That just the speed moving your tongue that quickly, it really is a very challenging. So a lot of singers opt to sing the word Balor instead, because it just changes. It just makes it easier to get it. It's a bit of a cheat, to be fair. It's a bit of a cheat, but yeah.
Do you do it the proper way though?
Well, it depends on how fast the ensemble wants to go, honestly.
Oh yeah.
I have done both. Yeah, I have done both, but yeah, it's certainly a challenge. You really need to like practice that. It's one of those weird sort of extended techniques for singers, I guess.
Yeah, and you're talking about how he sort of got folk tunes from all over the place. The last piece from the cycle that you brought is the Azerbaijan love song. We were reading up about this, and it has an amazing kind of story. Like so his wife, maybe not at the time, but the singer who these were written for, I think, right?
Cathy Berberian. Yeah.
She found them on an LP from the like Azerbaijan Soviet
Socialist Republic.
There you go.
Yeah. Yeah, she found a record.
Yeah, and it was all in Azerbaijani, and then the last verse is in Russian, and it compares love to a stove.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah, what?
It's quite nonsensical. Cathy Berberian, this wonderful singer who was married to the composer Berio at the time of it, or I think their marriage was sort of ending at the time that the piece was written. But yeah, she heard this recording of Azerbaijani, didn't speak a word of it, although she's originally Armenian. From her family history is Armenian, but no Azerbaijani, and she just learned it by rote. just by ear, sort of copied the sounds and then wrote out the sounds. So when you look at the score, it's not written in Azerbaijani. It's written in someone hearing Azerbaijani and then writing it out as it sounds. So it's quite comical in that sense as well, because it's not written in a language. And that is a really funny song. That is a really, really funny song. The last section of the piece, the last few sort of bars for the singer are not even sung. You have to do this really comic sort of half speaking cartoon voice, which is just a really hilarious way to finish any piece.
And then you're done.
Yeah.
And then you're done, yeah. And yeah, it's just such a great piece. It goes to so many different emotional places as well. I mean, you have this really quite comical, nonsensical, oddly sort of aggressive final Azerbaijani, apparently a love song, but it's not at all. But then you also have some really moving moments as well. You've got this Sardinian song before that, which is absolutely devastating, called Motetto di Tristura, which is in a dialect as well. It's in the Sardinian dialect, and the textures in the ensemble in that one are just so moving. And other songs that are just pull your heart out.
Cool. Yeah. And for the Azerbaijani song, since she transcribed it by rote, has somebody gone back through and like redone it in a way that's like actual Azerbaijani?
I'm sure they have, yeah.
Right? Yeah. Okay.
But that's what the score is. It does make it easier in a sense, because if you're just reading Azerbaijani, you might not know how to then pronounce certain words, whereas this sort of phoneticized version makes it plainly clear. But yeah, I'm sure that's been done. But I like Cathy's version. I like that there's also this little stamp of the singer who first performed it, for whom they were written as well. So she was an iconic singer, an iconic artist of that time, and sort of became very famous for making the first performance premieres and also recordings of very complicated and avant-garde contemporary vocal music, like the Sequenza by Berio, that is just an absolute minefield of vocal sounds. It's just bizarre and very, very virtuosic.
If you do me to sing,
and she also wrote her own pieces as well, including a vocal piece called Stripsody, which is it's not written with music. I don't know if you've seen the score, but it's a graphic score, so it's literally drawings of the things that you're meant to imitate.
Wow.
Yeah, and like very onomatopoeic writing of music. So yeah, I mean, I can't think of an example right now, but well, for example, like woof, but it's like written like it's a dog,
Yeah.
Like you have to just sound like a dog. So yeah, it's quite comical actually. So yeah, that's Cathy Berberian.
Have you performed that as well?
No, I haven't. I'd love to one day. Yeah.
One day. Add it to the list.
Here's the start of Stripsody by Cathy Berberian, performed by Berberian herself. There's actually a video on YouTube, which we've linked in the show notes, of her performing this piece with the graphics of the score popping up throughout the video. It's a great video to watch because you can really see how the score is literally drawings of figures and words instead of notes, and how from these, Berberian creates these weird and wonderful sounds.
Yeah. Blum, blum. Boing! You stupid kite, come down out of that tree. Come on. Or chop, chop, chop. Glam, 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 glam,
And with the Shaw piece, it's kind of, in a way, it's quite similar to the Berio in that there are parts of it that the singer is sort of singing relatively simple melodies, and then you've got these like really interesting textures of the ensemble underneath. Is that kind of why you brought them both together, or is it just because you love them both? Yeah.
Well, I love them both, but yes, I think there's a similarity between them. And when you hear the Caroline Shaw piece, it sounds like a folk song, and I think that it sort of, when I was thinking about the Berio, it reminded me also of the Caroline Shaw as a piece to bring up at the same time, because you have here an even newer composer. She was born in 1982, and she's written a piece as if it were an ancient folk song, like the ones that Berio used in his folk songs, and she's really found that sound in a way, but it is totally composed. And again, there are two songs in the Berio folk songs that were written by Berio, that were not folk songs, and the first two songs in the Berio folk songs, which were American songs that were written by this composer Niles. So I just find that sort of relationship really interesting between actual folk music and folk music that was composed but then sounds like folk music, and why that is.
And then what is folk music,
Yeah,
right?
exactly. Like honestly, really, like what? Yeah, folk music is being written every day.
Yeah. I think I actually heard, it was Pete Seeger who said that folk music is music sung by the people. And that's that was his definition of it, is just music sung by the people. So then there you go.
Well, folk meaning the people, does folk. Yeah, that's exactly it. Yeah, that's exactly it. So whatever, maybe the folk music of this time is going to be Dua Lipa. what everyone's singing and listening to becomes that. But it is interesting when you have contemporary composers, or in the case of Caroline Shaw, contemporary composers. I wouldn't say Berio is contemporary really anymore, but often is still sort of, I guess, 20th century modern, I suppose. But you have these composers that are able to also then still distill this ancient sound, this ancient folk sound, but then do something completely modern with it in the way that the instruments are sort of written around it. And yeah, I love what Caroline does with the text and does with the relationship between the string quartet and voice. It's just very beautiful.
Yeah, it also has a really compelling start as well, kind of like the Berio, in that the harmonics of the strings that are being used, and creating this kind of silvery sound to start the piece. It really draws you in, and you feel like you're going on this kind of journey through a magical place or something.
Quand voi l'aube du jour venir, nul rien ne doit trahir, qu'elle fait de moi des parties.
Yeah, totally. That's exactly that's the feeling that I got when I first discovered it as well. And the fact that the string quartet is written in a series of cells, as in a couple of seconds of music that just repeat, and it's more or less in free time. It's up to the vocalist to decide at what point they'd like to start the song, start the words. So it kind of comes really naturally out of this repeated, very sort of gossamer little cell, this gossamer string repeated thing that goes, over and over again in this, it starts to sort of draw you in, and then the voice sort of, begins in its own time. And I like that kind of writing as well, when a composer hands you the reins and say, okay, just in your own time. That's a nice feeling.
Yeah, definitely. And also it'll change depending on the context, the day, what space you're in. That gives you the freedom to actually be in your surrounding and decide what's best for that moment, right? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Sort of really let it settle. Let the music settle and wait until that moment is exactly right. Yeah, it's a really special gift to be given by a composer.
Quand voi l'aube du jour venir, nul rien ne doit trahir. Quelle fait de moi départir.
Have you met Caroline Shaw? Have you worked with her?
No, I haven't, but I'd love to. But I've been in touch with her. She kindly sent me the score for this. It's only been performed a couple of times. It was commissioned by Anne-Sophie von Otter, this Swedish mezzo-soprano who is pretty much my idol. I mean, she's an artist who I really, really look up to as an artist who is absolutely at the top of her game, an international star, but one who is kind of really defying convention consistently, even in what she wears. Like when she toured this piece around the States with the string quartet Brooklyn Rider, with whom she commissioned this piece, and a number of other pieces as well, she wore like a velvet suit, just
amazing.
Meanwhile, you've got other opera divas doing chamber music concerts in big ball gowns, then just ending up looking like opera singers doing something different. But with Anne-Sophie, that is her. It's completely natural. And I really admire singers that can, or any artists or musicians that can cross those lines, those boundaries that we seem to make up for ourselves.
Yeah.
That inspires me a lot. So I don't know how we got onto that, but
how did you discover the piece?
So the disc that Anne-Sophie von Otter and Brooklyn Rider released with this piece on it, I found through looking for another piece that was on that same CD. In listening to that album, came across this Caroline Shaw and thought, I have to do this one as well. And there are actually some others on that disc that are also wonderful and I'd like to do. So, I like to find things that have been commissioned for a specific artist and project, and then further that. There's perhaps an artist might not necessarily want to or be able to perform that piece as much as that piece deserves. So it's nice to find music that is quite fresh, but then hasn't been given as much of a chance to be performed, and then introducing it to an audience that definitely wouldn't have heard it before. So I think when I first performed it was only this year I first performed the Caroline Shaw, but I'm fairly certain it would have been the UK premiere of that.
Yeah. I mean, actually, that's a really good point, that so many new compositions are done one time for one thing. And there's so much that can happen with a piece when it gets to really settle, either with the same performers or different performers. Like if it gets spread, then
I'd say maybe more so with if it goes to other singers and they do different things with it. That's when the piece starts to take on a life of its own as well. And hearing different recordings of the same piece, just it's like looking at an image through different colored lenses, and it changes what you see completely. And the voice is such a personal thing as well. I mean, there is literally no two voices sound the same. So yeah, I really appreciated that that Caroline sent me the score, because it's also that sense of trust, of like, okay, this is a new thing, but you may you may be the second artist to go, and to also just like follow in Anne-Sophie von Otter's footsteps for anything is just amazing. So yeah, so I was really grateful for that, and I look forward to performing it more.
Yeah, that's really cool. And what's the piece about?
So it's an anonymous troubadour song from the 12th century in France. It's a French song, and the language is in Old French as well, which is also beautiful language to sing in. And it's a typical what was known as aubade, or a mourning song, in which there are lovers discreetly meeting and then resenting the coming of the next day, because it means that they don't have to separate, and it's really beautiful and sad at the same time. It's such a universal feeling that, like, oh, I don't want this to end, and the fact that there's this anonymous beautiful 12th century text that has that exact same sentiment that we've all experienced in some way or other. Whether that is a discreet meeting of lovers or something else, it's just that kind of strange resentment of something that you're enjoying. That it's going to finish.
How is it working with a string quartet compared to piano, compared to like a bigger ensemble?
I love it. It's not necessarily that like I love it more or less, but I think there's a real affinity between the voice and string instruments in general. I also grew up playing the cello, and I played a lot in string orchestras, surrounded by those four instruments, three instruments. And yeah, that just means a lot to me to engage in that way with an instrument that I used to play and that I miss to some extent.
Yeah.
So, How do you guys find it as violinists working with singers? Do you feel that there's also this sense of similarity between the two?
Yeah, I mean, maybe Emma can speak to this more, but since she's more of a singer than I am, for sure. Also, but like in terms of the relationship between the two of them, I think another thing that makes them really similar is that both of them are sort of, there's no like absolute truth of where a note goes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
There's so much flexibility. And I mean, I play in a string quartet, and so that's a thing that we're dealing with all the time that I think is part of what makes it both incredible and also incredibly challenging. So there's like complete flexibility in all directions, and then the sound you get together when it's good is so homogeneous and beautiful. And I think in many ways, because the voice is similar, I think it blends into that really nicely too.
Yeah.
Or it can.
It can. Yeah.
Yeah.
It depends on the singer, of course, and every voice is different, but the voice has the capacity to really fit within that texture so beautifully. And it's a very satisfying thing, I think, for the singer to feel surrounded by a string color. That being said, it's of course amazing to also be surrounded by an ensemble of other instruments as well, because then you've got so much variety that you can respond to and play with and imitate and all sorts of things. Like, for example, like the folk song, the Berio folk songs, which is scored for voice, flute, clarinet, harp, viola, cello, and percussion. So you've got pretty much all the sounds, like a little representative of each sound that you can have, minus brass perhaps. But yeah, so that is exciting as well, because then you've got a whole, color palette open to you that you can respond to. But with a string quartet, it's like a hug.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess the other thing, from the player's perspective and also knowing a bit about singing, whenever I am working with singers or trying to think like a singer when I'm playing, I just feel like another bit of my brain opens. And
Wow.
it literally opens my brain more because
That's amazing. That's the best thing I've ever heard. Yeah. Thank you. Yes.
Because singing is the most natural thing for anyone to do, and it's where music comes from, right? Like that's the start of how we communicate, and it comes from the way we communicate with like rhetoric and oratory and all that sort of stuff, and communicating any sort of emotion or argument. And when we're trying to do that as instruments or trying to be compatible with a singer when you're working with them, it just means that you're not so much in your kind of like little box of, well, I have to do this technical shit on my instrument. It's just like, oh wait, no, there's a singer singing stuff. Like this just makes just so much more sense because and also because there isn't, I just feel like there's not so much of a box holding singers into a particular way of doing things, that because you have to be so in touch with your whole body, and it's all just coming out of your individual body rather than just like, I'm going to make these sounds from these bits of wood and strings and things. Then thinking like that helps you get out of that kind of.
That's such a nice way of thinking about it.
Yeah, it's really true, because also often, in string quartet rehearsal, but in any kind of rehearsal, we often do, when we get stuck and we're like, this feels hard or awkward or the string crossing, but then often we're like, okay, wait, how would we sing it? How would we sing this thing? And so we do practice singing it, even though we are not singers. So like, it doesn't end up sounding like excellent, but it's enough to give us the idea of like, oh, right.
Like the voice shows you what the phrasing would want to be, because again, it's all about breath. It's all about breath.
Yeah, it's really true.
That's so nice. So nice to hear that you sing in your quartet rehearsals to work out how to make things less awkward.
Oh yeah,
all the time.
Yeah. No, it's a special experience, and I wish I'd love to work more with string quartet. Yeah, it's just a very special work that a recently discovered work, that Caroline Shaw, that sort of encapsulates what I love about singing with strings.
Yeah. Well, she's got many more years of awesome things in her. So
yeah. The other thing is when you hear her, the way she writes for voices. I don't know if have you heard her Passacaglia?
Yeah.
Not Passacaglia, sorry.
Partita. Yeah, for 8 voices.
Yeah.
For which she won the, what was it?
Pulitzer Prize, right?
The Pulitzer Prize for Music, yes, which is incredible.
To the side.
To the side.
To the side.
And around.
Through the middle
To
and
the side.
To the side.
To the side.
And around.
Through the middle
To the side.
To the side.
To the side.
To the side.
And around.
And around and around and around and around.
To the side. 2, 3, 4,
and
5,
6, 7, 8.
Through the midpoint. 2,
Of the line drawn from the
left side.
Left, 6,
Left,
element left and around and around.
Element and around.
It's such a cool piece, and the use of this sort of homogenous sound amongst the choir that she creates is just absolutely thrilling. She understands the voice, but also understands how to write for the voice with other instruments so well. I think she's clearly a singer.
Yeah, and a violinist, right? Because also her string quartet writing is clearly like she knows what she's doing when she's writing for the string quartet as well.
Have you played?
I haven't actually played any of her string quartets, but I've heard. I have some good friends who are in a quartet that I heard play one of her string quartets last summer. Emma was there also, and that was it was beautiful. And I think they've played like a lot of her work, and it's like very idiomatic for string quartet, and I think just does a really beautiful job of using all of those kinds of textures and sounds that you can get.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah, and we saw the Partita performed with Netherlands Dance Theatre dancing to it.
Wow, that would have been amazing.
Ago.
I'm a huge Netherlands Dance Theatre fan.
Yeah, but it's like one of the best things about living in The Hague is you ride 10 minutes down the road and you get like €10 youth tickets to see Netherlands Dance Theatre.
That is so cool.
Yep. And that was such a mind-blowing night.
Oh, yeah, I can't imagine. Amazing. Yeah. I'd love to. I had no idea that there was a ballet choreographed to that piece, but it also, it makes perfect sense. That would be absolutely perfect.
Yeah.
For that.
It was incredible.
Yeah. It's music that you can see, as well with her, and especially that piece. It's so theatrical. So it totally translates to the stage, to movement.
Yeah, absolutely.
To the side.
To the side.
To the side.
And around.
Through the middle
To
and
the side.
To the side.
to the side.
And around.
Through the middle
To the
and
side.
To the side.
to the side.
To the side.
And around.
And around and around
And around
to
and
the middle.
around.
To the side. 2, 3, 4,
And
5.
across. 6, 7, 8.
Through the midpoint.
Of the line drawn from the left side.
Allemande and around and around.
Allemande and around.
We have one more piece to talk about.
Indeed, we do. This is totally something different. But this is a really favorite song of mine from childhood. It's called Phoenix, and it's by this band called Aquarian Dream, and they were only around for 3 years in the 70s. This band, they were put together, or they were started by this American jazz drummer, composer, arranger, producer called Norman Connors. But just an amazing track. It's a disco classic. It's quite obscure, really. It's not one of those disco tracks that everyone's going to know, definitely not. But it means a lot to me because I grew up with this song. We had a very good family friend who was really into disco and obscure disco and funk and bossa nova as well, and made my sister and I a mixtape, like a playlist mixtape. I can't remember. It probably was even on cassette initially, and then switched to CD. And we named it after one of our cats. We had 2 Siamese cats called Shiro and Husky. And Husky, for some reason, was the name of one of the cats, even though Husky is a breed of dog. But anyway. So we called this CD Disco Husky. And I remember my mum is an artist, and she drew like a cartoon Siamese cat on the front. This CD, I think we probably have the original cassette and CD somewhere lying around, but it just became, you have like playlists or albums or CDs that just become such important things for the family, and you just always revisit them, and in what order the tracks come, how it starts, and it's all still burned into your memories,
and takes you back to that time.
Totally. So and I just have vivid memories of dancing around to this when I was little, and it's just a great track as well. It's got amazing vocals in it, and just a lot of fun to sing along to. The lyrics are just, quite ridiculous. Sort of, I've got the wings of a phoenix flying high, and I've got the style of a phoenix. So it's really sort of triumphant in this super, super camp 70s disco way, which, when you're 8 and you really like glitter, I mean, that's just heaven.
I've got the style of a
So that's why I wanted to talk about it, really, because it's just one of those songs that, I wish it were more famous, because it is such a great track. The production is so great. It's rhythmically really interesting. It has these little breakdowns throughout, and it's just a good one.
I listened to it this morning while making breakfast, and I could not dance. Like it just
you can't not dance. Yeah. Also, like the whole disco Husky thing, as that whole compilation had so much other great music on it, a lot of disco and also some bossa nova, and it kind of informed, I think, my musical taste and interests in a way that I don't think I was expecting at all. Like, I still really love disco, and what disco then brought to the house music thing, all of the samples and everything that were used from 70s disco in house music. After school, I had a stint working as a host in a nightclub, and it was like a really disco centric nightclub, and I just love dancing to disco and house music that was really inspired by disco. And I mean, like, my days of clubbing are very much behind me, but they're really treasured memories of dancing to that, and I think I just got that. I got that taste for disco when I was 8, listening to this song, dancing around my room, and and that was kind of what, my when I did have those years of sort of going out dancing, that was what I would always choose to dance to. And I definitely remember one time being in one of my favorite clubs in Melbourne and speaking to the DJ, who was a friend of mine, and I sort of said, "Do you know Aquarian Dream? Do you know this song Phoenix?" He was like, "Whoa, that's such a deep cut. I've never played this. No one knows it. So, like, why would I spin it?" And I said, "No, please just do it. Just give it a go. Wait and see what happens." And sure enough, the dance floor absolutely lit up. And it was just this bizarre moment where I was like, okay, I'm 19 or however old I was, in a club with my friends, dancing to the same song that I used to dance to when I was like 7. So
yeah. Oh, awesome.
That's really cool. Also, you were talking about it being rhythmically really like fun and interesting, and that was the thing that Emma and I were talking about the rest of the music that you brought today, is that there's a lot of really cool, intricate rhythmic stuff happening.
Yeah. I mean, as a singer, I really love to rhythmically challenge myself, and I think that's part of why I also perform so much contemporary music and 20th century music and just unusual things. That really makes me tick. And yeah, I guess that's a feature in all of the songs all of the pieces that I've brought, is that you can dance to it.
Yeah. So disco's totally related, is what we're saying.
Yes, disco is everything. It all started with disco. Yeah.
Yep. Well, that sounds like a pretty good place to start wrapping it up.
We have a question that we ask everybody at the end of every interview.
Yeah.
And that is there a piece from another instrument's repertoire that you're jealous of?
Oh, let me have a think. I mean, there are lots, honestly. Yeah. There are so many great.
Yeah.
Well, there are a couple of pieces that spring to mind immediately, one of which is a viola piece, and it's just a beautiful tune. And it's something from childhood in that I listen to it a lot. I listen to it being practiced a lot when I was a kid, by being practiced by my dad, who played the viola and played this piece quite a lot. It's a piece by Berlioz, and it's called Harold in Italy. And it's just a beautiful, beautiful piece with a beautiful tune. And I think it would sing very well. It's the kind of piece that it would be a beautiful vocal piece. Obviously, it's a viola. It's essentially a viola concerto. So it should be a viola concerto. There's not enough great music for that instrument anyway. So I certainly wouldn't want to steal it. But I always find myself singing along to it if I hear it. So that's kind of perhaps one.
That's great.
Oh, there's one other piece I've been listening to a lot recently that I'm like really obsessed with. I remember discovering it years ago. It's by Bartok. It's the Piano Sonata. Do you know it?
Oh, yes.
No.
It's really cool. It's real, and it has those really jagged edges, rhythmic jagged edges. It's really aggressive and fun, and doesn't take itself too seriously, but has this really this great sense of humor and life. Again, it's not like you can sing that piece, but I would love to be able to sit down at the piano and play that, because it's just wild.
Yeah, nice.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, Bartok, so good.
Bartok is so good. Yeah. Love Bartok.
Yeah. And what is the best way for people to get in touch with you? Do you have, or to support you, or whatever?
That's a lovely question. I am on Facebook. I've got a Facebook artist page. I'm on Twitter at Lotte BettsDean. On Instagram at Dottie Let's Bean. Funny spoonerism there that I now regret. So yeah, lol. But then at the moment, there are a couple of sort of online things happening. Emma, I'm not sure if I think you knew about that. They did like an online concert in April, so that's still available online, and it is ticketed, but it also goes to support a fund based in London that's supporting Australian young musicians and dancers. So that is sort of one way of supporting if people want to, and it's a collection of, it's a recital of songs alongside 7 musicians from around the world. And it was made in April when we were all very much completely still in lockdown, so the whole thing is split screen. Now we can at least be in the same room to perform again. But yeah, it was a huge challenge, but it was really fun to put together. That was definitely the biggest thing I've done during lockdown. But anyone can get in touch on my social media, and my website is just lottebettsdean.com, and would be happy to hear from anyone if anyone has any questions or wants to make recommendations or anything. That would be great.
Yeah, cool. Well, we'll put all of those things in our show notes for everyone.
Fab.
Yeah, Thank you so much for joining us. Thanks for being here.
Thank you so much.
This was really fun.
Thanks so much for tuning in to Outside the Music Box. We hope you enjoyed our chat with Lotte BettsDean.
If so, please subscribe, rate and review this podcast and tell all your friends about it. It really makes a difference in the algorithm of the internet magic and helps our visibility. And thanks to Joanna Neuschatz for her help with editing.
We'd also love to hear from you. If you have any questions or want to share music that you love, you can write to us at concerts.musicbox@gmail.com or on Facebook and Instagram at musicboxconcerts. Write in with comments or questions and we'll get back to you.
In the show notes, we've included links to 3 Spotify playlists, one specifically for the pieces in this episode, and the others for all the pieces we've talked about on this podcast so far. However, we really encourage you to purchase music in order to support the artists. The best way to support Lotte is by going to her website, lottebettsdean.com, which we've also linked in the show notes, or following her on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter.
See you next time outside the Music Box.